when you look at
Yeah.
everything that this movie has to offer, it's like
Yeah.
there's a lot
But
more
that's the
going on in
question,
this
though.
movie.
Like,
you know,
like you throw out like, well, here's stuff like, skiing scene and train
Awesome.
scene and all that, and that's like that's cool, but that's like just having a laundry list of like fun isn't enough to just like, oh, the story's great. It's like I've always said, like the story's going to be king for me. And because it's easy to just like write in all this crap, right? Like, hey, writer, make sure there's skiing in this movie and underwater stuff and babes.
the great thing about this movie is that even though like it has it's a travel movie, right? I mean, we go to Egypt, we see mountains. I mean, there's so many locations in this movie. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a laundry list of really cool exotic places that most people don't ever get to see in their lifetime in this movie.
Yep.
That's sprinkles, that's candy, that's like most movies, right? That's part of the spectacle of this movie. This movie is very spectacle heavy, much like Goldfinger was in many ways. But what the thing this movie has that some of the other movies don't have is a somewhat, even if it's not played up as much as some other movies, like one of my favorites, it has a story. And that story is, it asks the question of like, wait, so Bond kills all these henchmen and all these guys, and nobody else is like, that guy, I'm gonna get him. You know what I mean? So Bond kills all these henchmen and all these guys, and nobody else is like, that guy, I'm gonna get him. You know what I mean?
The death of 007.
And then it just so happens that he meets his equal in Russia, and they kind of fall in love, because the movie is called The Spy Who Loved Me. They don't fall in love like the more romantic way, but essentially, they're going together, they're sleeping together, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, she's like,
Bond love.
it's Bond love. But at the end of the day, she's like, yeah, my lover who, I was all about in the beginning of the movie, who's like, I'm going off to Austria to go on a mission. And she's like, did you kill him?
The answer to the question is yes. I did kill him.
Then, when this mission is over, I will kill you.
I kill a lot of people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at least it asks that little bit of a question, that little bit of a story right there, that I'm like,
yeah,
that's the one thing that levels this movie just a little bit higher for me than say a lot of the other movies, that even the Connery movies. But then when you add that to the spectacle of all the locations, as well as many of the action scenes, like that's kind of what does it for me for this movie. And yeah, you can make the argument that like Stromberg isn't necessarily the strongest villain that we've had, but he's much better than some of the other ones we've had in the past, such as like
him
Largo.
Being a weak, I think him being a weak bad guy is what brings it down for me. I don't love the button pushing bad guy, which this guy kind of falls into. And then he even like during the climax of the movie just leaves the big boat. I forget what it's called.
The Laparis.
Like every time I see this movie, he's stand-in Blofeld. He's not as good as Blofeld. He doesn't have the mysteriousness of especially the early Blofeld, but he's like, this is stand-in Blofeld. This is like, oh, well, we can't use Blofeld. Well, we'll create this new character named Stromberg. And instead of a squid, it's a fish symbol. And like, he's got fish hands, so he's deformed. And like, and he's also at least intelligent in the sense that like it plays off the audience, especially his intro scene where so if you guys remember the beginning of the movie, it's Bond's trying to find out where this heat-seeking device is, or trying to trace the heat-seeking device.
Yeah.
And the first scene is like he's talking to the guys who created the device, that he hired to build the device, that he was going to pay all this money to.
Those guys are awesome.
And there's, these two guys come into his office, and we first meet him, and we don't know where we're at. We think we're in some kind of like castle or something, like someplace in France, right? And, he has this hot broad sitting on the other end of the table, eating food with them silently. And it's a very, very Blofeld scene.
Someone has been attempting to sell the plans of our tracking project.
And then you're like, oh, it was her all along. But so it's you think he's going to kill one of those guys, and it turns out it's the chick. But then on top of that, he's like, all right, let's wait till they get on the helicopter so we can say it's an accident.
Yeah, we made it. We made it. They're shaking hands. We're like, yeah.
One of
They
the,
just
one of the parts
explode.
I love the most about that makes that so villainous is the orchestral music in the background too.
Yeah.
Like classical violin music. It makes him seem more evil and calm, and
Well, here's the thing, Scott.
very
Here's
in
the
control.
thing. We talked last time about diegetic versus non-diegetic, and this movie just so happens to play around with that idea
Yes, I was going to
several
say this.
times. So with the death of his assistant, who he's like, you betrayed me, and I don't really mind a bad guy being a button pusher because it is kind of fun. Like it's like from his seat, he's able to just delve out so much destruction, and it can be a lot of fun. So like she gets in the elevator, she falls down the slide. There's a subtle cap to that scene later. Maybe you guys noticed it, maybe you didn't, but when Bond is there later and he's just waiting for Stromberg and he's like kind of looking around at all the fish, he catches sight of her hand at the bottom of the tank.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, huh, that's weird. It's like
Pretty
like
obvious.
Bond's like, this is a villain, like there's a lady's hand. But anyway, so when that classical music comes on, can only the audience hear it, or does Stromberg, did he hit play and he likes to listen to classical music as he's doing
I would
his
hope
thing
he
of
hit
delving?
play,
Totally.
personally.
I would.
Yeah.
It's like you can totally believe that music is heard from everybody.
The pyramid scene reminded me of when you were talking about Goldfinger and you were like, Oddjob has this thing when they mentioned Oddjob. But in this movie, you kind of get that, but at the same time, you're not 100% sure if that is the music from the pyramid show or if it is...
Oh, the John
like
Wick scene.
Yeah, when you have like the cool light and all that stuff, like that looks really cool for the 1970s. And then you have the fact that like you have this like big music.
It's two things, right? It allowed the score over the top of this chase scene, death scene, and fight scene to be over the top. And that's kind of what makes it fun. And then on top of that, you have this narrator of the Pyramids show, and everything he's saying is like directly referencing what you're seeing on screen.
A servant of the king awaits the call to set out upon his journey into eternity. Death lies waiting.
This man's tomb, or a servant of the king, aka Bond. I mean, I know Queen, but like a servant of the king, defending against death. Like everything that this guy is saying, it's a clever scene because everything the narrator's saying is referring to Bond's actions and everybody else's actions. But then also, it's like as he's fighting these guys, you have this triumphant music that would never work on its own. Cut to the scene with Sandor with that music, and you'd be like, what the fuck is this? But because it's excused by the Pyramids show, it can be in there to the point where then Bond turns to Triple X and he's like, hope you enjoyed the show. Like it's that whole scene is really clever.
It looks cool too. The lighting is awesome.
It's like the one mise en scène moment in this film, much like how Live and Let Die had the funeral procession.
Good night.
And how that all plays out really well, and there's a setup and payoff to that. I think this, even though there's not like a setup and payoff essentially, but I think this scene has that mise en scène, that like extra element of taking something and reframing it in a really cool way.
Yeah.
And that's like a highlight moment for me in this movie.
I didn't notice